Book of Heaven, Volume 3, Part 4. January 8th, 1900. Even the errors will do good. Firmness and stability in operating. I was thinking to myself, who knows how much nonsense, how many errors are contained in these things that I write? At that moment, I felt I was losing consciousness, and blessed Jesus came and said to me, "My daughter, even the errors will do good, and this in order to make known that there is no artifice on your part, and that you are no doctor, because if you were, you yourself would have realized where you were mistaken. And this will also make shine more that it is I who speak to you, by looking at it in a simple way. However, I assure you that they will not find a shadow of vice or anything which is not virtue, because while you write, I myself guide your hand. At the most, they may find some errors at first sight, but if they look at it thoroughly, in it they will find the truth." Having said this, he disappeared, but after a few hours he came back. I was feeling all hesitant and concerned about the words he had spoken to me, and he added, "My heritage is firmness and stability. I am not subject to any change, and the more the soul draws near me and advances on the path of virtues, the firmer and more stable she feels in operating good. And the farther she remains from me, the more she will be subject to changing and oscillating, now toward good, now toward evil." January 12th, 1900. Difference between knowledge of self and humility. Jesus alone can glory in possessing true humility. Finding myself in my usual state, my lovable Jesus came in a pitiful state. He had his hands bound tightly, his face covered with spit, and several people were slapping him horribly. And he remained quiet, placid, without making one movement or emitting one lament, not even a batting of eyelashes, in order to show that he himself wanted to suffer these outrages. And this not only externally, but also internally. What a moving scene, such as to break the hardest hearts. How many things that face said, with that spit hanging, dirtied with mud. I felt horrified. I trembled. I saw myself all pride before Jesus. While he was in that appearance, he said to me, "My daughter, only the little ones let themselves be handled as one wants, not those who are little of human reason, but those who are little, yet filled with divine reason. I alone can say that I am humble, because in man, that which is said to be humility should rather be called knowledge of self, and one who does not know himself already walks in falsehood." Jesus remained silent for a few minutes, and I stayed there, contemplating him. While I was doing this, I saw a hand carrying a light, which, searching in my interior, in the most intimate hiding places, wanted to see whether the knowledge of myself and love of humiliations, confusions, and opprobriums were present in me. That light found a void in my interior, and I too saw it, which had to be filled with humiliations and confusions, in the example of blessed Jesus. Oh, how many things that light and that holy face which was before me made me comprehend! I said to myself, a God humiliated and confused for love of me, and I a sinner without these insignia. A God stable, firm in bearing so many insults, so much so that he does not even move a bit to shake that disgusting spit off of himself. Ah, his interior before God and his exterior before men are made manifest to me. And yet, if he wants to free himself, he can, because it is not the chains that bind him, but his firm will, which wants to save mankind at any cost. And I, where are my humiliations? Where the firmness, the constancy in doing good for love of my Jesus and for love of my neighbor? Ah, how different we are as victims, myself and Jesus. Ah, we are not similar at all. While my little brain was lost in this, my adorable Jesus told me, only my humanity was filled with opprobriums and humiliations, to the point that they overflowed outside. This is why heaven and earth tremble before my virtues, and the souls who love me use my humanity as the staircase in order to ascend and lap up a few little drops of my virtues. Tell me now, before my humility, where is yours? I alone can glory in possessing true humility. My divinity, united to my humanity, could operate prodigies at each step, word, and work. Yet I voluntarily constrained myself within the circle of my humanity. I showed myself as the poorest, and I reached the point of mingling even with sinners. I could have done the work of redemption in very little time, and even with one single word. Yet, during the course of many years, with many hardships and sufferings, I wanted to make the miseries of man my own. I wanted to exercise myself in many different actions, so that man might be completely renewed, divinized, even in the lowest works. In fact, once they had been exercised by me, who was God and man, they received new splendor and remained with the imprint of divine works. My divinity, hidden within my humanity, wanted to lower itself to such lowness, subjecting itself to the course of human actions, while with one single act of my will I could have created infinite worlds. Feeling the miseries and the weaknesses of others as if they were its own, seeing itself covered with all the sins of men before divine justice, having to pay their penalty at the price of unheard of pains and with the shedding of all its blood. Thus it exercised continuous acts of profound and heroic humility. Here, O daughter, is the immense difference between my humility and the humility of creatures, which is only a shadow in the face of mine, even that of all my saints, because the creature is always a creature, and does not know, as I know, how great is the weight of sin. Even though heroic souls, following my example, have offered themselves to suffer the pains of others, their pains are not different from those of the other creatures. They are not new things for them, because they are made of the same clay. Besides, the mere thought that those pains are the cause of new gains, and that they glorify God, is a great honor for them. Furthermore, the creature is restricted within the circle in which God placed her, and she cannot go out of those limits within which she has been circumscribed by God. Oh, if it were in their power to do or undo things, how many other things they would do. Everyone would reach the stars. But my divinized humanity had no limits, yet it voluntarily constrained itself within itself. And this was the braiding of all my works with heroic humility. This had been the cause of all the evils that inundate the earth, lack of humility, and I, by exercising this virtue, was to draw all goods from divine justice. Ah, yes, no concessions of graces depart from my throne, if not by means of humility, nor can any ticket be received by me, if it does not carry the signature of humility. No prayer is listened to by my ears, and moves my heart to compassion, if it is not perfumed by the fragrance of humility. If the creature does not arrive at destroying that seed of honor, of esteem, and this can be destroyed by arriving at loving to be despised, humiliated, confused, she will feel a braiding of thorns around her heart. She will perceive a void in her heart that will always bother her, and will render her very dissimilar to my most holy humanity. And if she does not arrive at loving humiliations, at the most, she will be able to know herself a little bit, but will not shine before me, clothed with the garment of humility, beautiful and worthy of sympathy. Who can say how many things I comprehended about this virtue, and the difference between knowledge of self and humility? I seemed to touch with my own hand the distinction between these two virtues, but I have no words to explain myself. In order to say something, I will use an image. For example, a poor man says he is poor, and he frankly manifests his poverty, also to people who do not know him, and who perhaps may believe that he possesses something. It can be said that he knows himself and tells the truth, and because of this, he is loved more. He moves others to compassion for his miserable state, and everyone helps him. So it is to know oneself. If then, feeling ashamed to manifest his poverty, that poor man boasted of being rich, while everyone knows that he does not even have clothes to cover himself, and that he is dying of hunger, what happens? Everyone despises him. Nobody helps him. And he becomes an object of mockery and ridicule to anyone who knows him. And the miserable one, going from bad to worse, ends up dying. So is pride before God, and also before other men. And here is how one who does not know himself already goes out of the truth and falls into the path of falsehood. Now here is the difference with humility. though it seems to me that knowledge of self and humility are sisters born of the same womb, and one can never be humble if he does not know himself. For example, there is a rich man who, out of love for humiliations, stripping himself of his noble garments, covers himself with miserable rags. He lives unknown, manifesting to no one who he is. He mingles with the poorest. He lives with the poor as if he were one of them, and makes scorns and confusions his delights. Here is the beautiful sister of the knowledge of self. That is humility. Ah, yes, humility draws grace. Humility breaks the strongest chains, which are sin. Humility surmounts any wall of division between the soul and God, and brings her back to Him. Humility is the little plant, but always green and flowery, not subject to being gnawed by worms, nor will winds, hail, or heat be able to do harm to it, or make it wither even slightly. Humility, though it is the littlest plant, sends out extremely high branches, which penetrate even into heaven, and braid around the heart of our Lord. And only the branches that come from this little plant have free access into that adorable heart. Humility is the anchor of peace in the storms of the waves of the sea of this life. Humility is the salt that spices all virtues and preserves the soul from the corruption of sin. Humility is the little grass that sprouts along the path treaded by wayfarers, such that as it is trampled, it disappears, but soon it can be seen sprouting again, more beautiful than before. Humility is like a gentle graft that refines the wild plant. Humility is the sunset of guilt. Humility is the newborn of grace. Humility is like the moon that guides us in the darkness of the night of this life. Humility is like that shrewd merchant who knows well how to trade his riches, and does not waste even one penny of the grace that is given to him. Humility is the key to the door of heaven, such that no one can enter into it if he does not keep this key in good custody. Finally, otherwise I would never end it, and I would be too long. Humility is the smile of God and of all the Imperium, and it is the crying of all hell. January 17th, 1900. Evil and Cunning of Man. This morning, my adorable Jesus was coming and going, but always in silence. Then I felt myself going outside of myself, and I heard Jesus behind me saying, "Man says, there is no more rectitude, and as long as things are this way, we will not be able to obtain any success in our intents. So let us fake virtue. Let us pretend we are upright. Let us show ourselves as true friends on the outside, for in this way it will be easier to weave our nets and deceive others. And when we come out to plunder them and harm them, since everyone believes that we are friends, we will easily have them in our hands without resistance. Look at where the cunning of man reaches." After this, wanting a special act of reparation, It seemed that blessed Jesus was cutting off my life, offering me to divine justice. In the act in which he was doing this, I thought that Jesus would make me pass away from this life. So I said to him, "Lord, I do not want to come to heaven without your insignia. First crucify me, and then take me." So he pierced my hands and feet through with the nails. But while doing this, to my highest sorrow, he disappeared, and I found myself inside myself. I said to myself, "I am still here. Ah, how many times you have done this to me, my dear Jesus. Indeed, you have a special art for being able to do it, for you make me believe that I must die. And so I laugh at the world, at the pains, and I laugh even at you, because the time of our being separated is ended, and there will be no more intervals of separation. But as soon as the laughing begins, as I find myself bound once again with the shackles of the wall of this fragile body, forgetting that I had just begun to laugh, I resume the crying, the moans, and the sighs of my separation from you. Oh Lord, hurry, for I feel compelled to come. January 22nd, 1900. Correspondence to Grace. After having gone through most bitter days of privation, my poor heart was struggling between the fear of having lost him and the hope that, who knows, I might see him again. Oh God, what a bloody war this poor heart of mine had to endure! The pain was so great that now it would become ice cold. Now it would be squeezed as though under a press, and would drip blood. While I was in this state, I felt my sweet Jesus near me. He removed a veil from me, which prevented me from seeing him. So finally I was able to see him. Immediately I said to him, "Ah, Lord, you don't love me any more." And he, "Yes, yes, what I recommend to you is correspondence to my grace. And in order to be faithful, you must be like the echo that resounds in an empty space, such that, as soon as the voice begins to be emitted, immediately without the slightest delay, one can hear the echo booming after it. In the same way, as soon as you begin to receive my grace, without even waiting for me to finish giving it, begin immediately the echo of your correspondence. January 27th, 1900. The Order of the Virtues in the Soul. I continue to be almost without my sweet Jesus. My life fails me because of the pain. I feel such tedium, boredom, tiredness of life. I kept saying in my interior, "Oh, how my exile has been prolonged! Oh, what happiness mine would be if I could release the bonds of this body, so that my soul might take wing freely toward my highest good." A thought said to me, "And what if you go to hell?" And I, so as not to call the devil to fight me, immediately snapped out of it by saying, "Well then, even from hell I will send my sighs to my sweet Jesus. Even there do I want to love him." While I was amid these and other thoughts, the story would be too long if I wanted to repeat them all. Lovable Jesus made himself seen for just a little, but with a serious appearance, and he told me, Your time has not come yet. Then, with an intellectual light, he made me comprehend that everything must be orderly in the soul. The soul possesses many little apartments, in which each virtue takes its place, even though it can be said that one single virtue contains all other virtues within itself, and that the soul, by possessing only one of them, comes to be endowed with all the other virtues. However, in spite of this, they are all distinct among themselves, so much so that each of them has its own place in the soul. And here is how all the virtues take their origin from the mystery of the sacrosanct Trinity. While it is one, there are three distinct persons. And while they are three, they are one. I also comprehended that these apartments in the soul are either full of virtue or of the vice opposite to that virtue. And if there is neither virtue nor vice, they remain empty. It seemed to me that they are like a house which contains many rooms, all empty. Or some rooms are full of snakes, some of mud, some are filled with pieces of furniture full of dust, some are dark. Ah, Lord, you alone can put my poor soul in order. January 28th, 1900. What mortification does. It still continues in the same way. This morning he transported me outside of myself. After a long time, I seemed to see Jesus with clarity, but I saw myself as so bad that I did not dare to utter a single word. We looked at each other, but in silence. Through those mutual gazes, I comprehended that my good Jesus was filled with bitternesses, but I did not dare to say, "Pour them into me." He himself drew near me and began to pour them, but unable to contain them, as I received them, I dropped them to the ground. He said to me, "What are you doing? You do not want to share in my bitternesses any more? You no longer want to give me relief in my pains?" And I, "Lord, this is not my will. I myself don't know what has happened to me. I feel so full that I don't know where to contain them. Only a prodigy of yours can enlarge my interior so that I may receive your bitternesses." Then Jesus marked me with a large sign of the cross, and he poured again. So it seemed I was able to contain them, and then he added, "My daughter, mortification is like fire that dries up all humors. In the same way, mortification dries up all the bad humors that are present in the soul, and it inundates her with a sanctifying humor, in such a way as to make the most beautiful virtues germinate." You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 3, Part 4. Fiat.